right on the side of us. You could kind of see the thing moving through the woods.
All I can remember is flipping the light on, and I see this creature, and I knew in my heart, I knew in my mind, in the whole my heart, this isn't a man.
And then this thing walks across the road, takes a turn towards us, and then leaps over a guardrail.
Went to look forward, and there was a big black thing.
Welcome to Squatch-D TV, exploring the Bigfoot mystery each week with your hosts, veteran researcher, author, and TV personality, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, and from the Bigfoot Research Project of Kentucky, Chris Bennett. Sit back and buckle up as we bring you guests from around North America discussing the Bigfoot phenomena, but not without a few laughs, too. Here are your hosts, Steve and Chris.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatch-D TV for December 4th, 2022. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, along with my co-host down there, Mr. Chris Bennett. How the hell are you, Chris?
Steve, we're doing good, man. We're a little cool, though. It's been in the 30s, and I don't like it.
Yeah, 20s here, brother. 20s here.
Yeah, I guess no matter how bad it gets, it could be worse.
Well, as everybody can see, we have our guest down there. And I just want to throw a quick shout out to hello, Mark. How are you?
I am excellent, guys. Thanks for having me on this evening.
Oh, anytime, my brother, anytime. And, you and I have known each other for quite a while, and but we'll get all into that. But we got to do our traditional roll call for the show. And so here we go. And let me get up there. Who is the first in? I got to scroll. All the people are all
That
talking.
room's been hopping. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, guys.
So we got Lance Windsor, first one in tonight. Turn the lights on for everybody else. Paul Daglian, Brian McMahon. B is in the house. Hello, B.
B.
Well, B may not be in the house. He said she was dropping by because she's visiting friends.
Okay.
Let's see. Daniel Weeks from
Daniel.
Southern Sierra. Hello, Ammon Chris. Lester Taylor. Grasshopper in the house. Mick is in the house, sitting alongside his meatloaf. Angel.
Hey, Angel.
Anyway, we got Sandra Piper, Angel Nolan. Hello, Don Fuller's in the house. Jay Fritz.
Hey, Donald.
Good old Jay. Jen is in the house. Sasquatch Wizard Adirondacks. Prairie Fire. Lockbeard. And there's Joe from Western New York, Bigfoot.
Hey, Joe.
My Eyes. This is where we start having to get more picky.
My
Uncle
Eyes.
Bones is in the house.
Bones.
Of course, the Bat Mom in the house. Hello, Bat Mom. Lowrider. And I think we already said My Eyes. think we got everybody that's made a chat. I know I saw Brent from the Tall Ones in the chat. He's making dinner.
Hey, Brent.
Helton, a.k.a. Fasterman's in the house. Hello, Helton. Good to see you again, sir. Michael Haywood, hello.
Hey, Mike.
And Lockbeard throwing a shout-outs to everybody. Arthur Watch, hello. Former everything. John Swan. Kaiju Ninja 1985. Hi, guys. We're so glad to see everybody come back. Finding the Trackway. And I think I got everybody. If we missed anybody, we apologize. That's not our...
the chat is really hot.
Not our intent. Yeah, it's really hot.
I'm tickled to death we got so many in the chat tonight. It's good to see each and every one of you. We appreciate you being here with us.
So anyway, we have had one heck of a week, and guess what we're debuting tonight, folks? The listener call-in line. So at some point, as we're going to talking with Mark, we're going to open up not only the questions for you guys, and in the chat, but if you want to actually call in and interact with us, we'll pop the caller line in just like this, and boom, there's the caller line. And it's being hidden, which I kind of like. And once we open that up, you come on in and chat away with us and ask whatever you want. Cool. Uh-oh. Bigfoot Okanagan's in the house. Mark's in the house as well. Leon, Mark. There he is. It's your fault, LOL. It's always my fault. So, but anyway, we'll do our traditional
kudos and salutations.
Very good. So anyway, we've often talked about on this program, and we're not afraid to talk about the disintegration of evidence that comes out sometimes on social media. Yeah. We've seen it on YouTube. We've seen it on TikTok now. We've seen it for years on Facebook. And a lot of that stuff doesn't come out with a lot of predicate information. But Mark is a guy who's kind of an outsider to the Bigfoot world. He doesn't actually do Bigfoot research, but he watches it very closely, and he has for years. And Mark has had his own podcast and interviewed people from all sorts of different phenomena, from ufology to paranormal to the Bigfoot world. And I had the honor of being on his show several times. And he's got a lot to say about what he's observed especially over the last few years. And so we'll get right to it. Mark, how are you again, my brother? Good to hear from you.
I'm doing terrific. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a lot of fun to be on the other side of the board, as it were. I do have to say one thing. When did Western New York Bigfoot research start? That's one that kind of jumped out at me over the last few months of listening to you guys and seeing them in the chat room. Are they newer, or because they blew right by my radar? They would have been somebody I would have had in studio when I was on WECK.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know. Joe's been at it a while. You know what? Let's pop and see if he can come in. Maybe he can answer that question for you.
Sure. Not like it's the biggest thing in the world, but when I started the Edge of the Unknown on a local radio station here, 12 years ago, my pilot episode to actually get the approval of the station manager and the PD was Paul from BFRO, and he was my first in-studio guest as well.
Paul Mattea.
And yeah, super, super good guy, and have had the pleasure over, the years that I did the show on ECK, and then when I moved to, the different radio, the online radio networks, Paul Bartholomew has always been awesome. Steve, you've always been super good to me. A number of different organizations, but that one just jumped out at me, and I'm like, if that was in my backyard that entire time I was doing it and had no idea, I'm like kicking myself.
And here is Joe now.
Joe.
What's going on?
Joe, would you like to answer, Mark's question about when you got started? And
Sure. What was the question? No. No, it doesn't surprise me. I fly under everybody's radar. I flew under the radar for, right up until about 6 years ago. And that's why, because I didn't really have a name or start like an organization.
He was just Joe.
6 years. Yeah, it was just me going out there stumbling around the woods looking for evidence of Bigfoot. So it wasn't until about 6 years ago that I discovered everything on the internet. And I was like, holy crap, I was surprised. I was like, what is all this that I'm missing? And then I was like, well, let me get on there. And at first I started out as Western New York Bigfoot Research Organization, and I got kind of tired of whiny bro. Whiny bro. And so and there was other reasons, but I ended up changing it to what it is currently, which is the Western New York Bigfoot Investigation Group. So yeah,
well, good. That makes me feel better that I didn't miss you when I was in the full blown show of the Edge of the Unknown. So that makes me feel better. And you must have been obviously a little bit closer, or at least watching. Again, going back probably even farther, probably 16 years ago or so, with the hoax out in Clarence, New York. I don't even remember the gentleman that came out.
Hans Mobius.
Well, Hans Mobius. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, not kicking around that one, because that was obviously a well-known hoax.
And guess who showed up to promote that one?
That's his name. You and Steve, you and I talked about it.
That's who showed up to promote that one, was Biscardi.
That's correct. And got chased out of town.
That was the one with the Bigfoot photos by the golf cart or something.
Yeah, by the John Deere. Yeah,
had the big fro on there. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, the head looked like a big hairy ping pong ball. But anyway, Joe, thanks for swinging in, and I may recall you in a little bit.
No problem.
All right, my brother.
Good to see you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Well, that settles that. That was easy. And a good test of your system, and a good test of your system as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, sure was. So anyway, Mark, you got a lot to say about what's been going on in the Bigfoot community, because you've talked to people like Paul Matea and Paul Bartholomew and me, and some really respectable people. What goes?
What drives me nuts, and it's not necessarily the television shows that are a little bit off. I'm not gonna. They're there for a reason. It's entertainment, and people like to see all that sort of thing. And I see that for what it is. But when it comes down to people who are relaying information that they want people to take seriously, I've just seen a very serious drop in credibility. And when people are want to be facts, I understand in the heat of the moment, you're on a hike, you're on a camping trip, you're not expecting something, to jump out at you. You're not prepared. So, anything that you might catch as far as a photo or video, totally understand that it's not going to be perfect. In any circumstance of anything happening out in the wilderness that takes you by surprise, or gosh, walking downtown in any given city. That's not what I have the biggest issue with. What I have been having an issue with is the clearly nonsense, the clear nonsense that is being allowed to be shared in of scientific investigation, and not just an interesting story or a scary story, or I have no idea what this was, but something strange happened to me in the woods. There are so many outlets now for the kooks, and and I love the woonacy, that just the unbelievable nonstop BS that unfortunately really resonates with people and sucks a lot of people in, and takes away any kind of scientific look at what is or what could be running around in the woods, whether it's here or Florida or anywhere in the world. And that has led me to look back at a lot of other pieces of, I hate to use air quotes, but stuff that people have said, no, that's evidence, and we're going to bring off of that. And I just started doing this kind of retrospective of all these things that, at one point I might have given a little bit of, okay, yeah, that's possible, to, okay, you know what, that's probably not what happened. There's probably more to it than that. But again, just that perpetuation of, this really happened. This is evidence. This is something that, people should be paying attention to, when honestly, it's just as weak as the Hans Mobius thing that happened,
Right.
Literally 8 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And it's just, and I don't want to take up, and just keep rambling, but the genesis of all this, and I'm not going to name the podcast because I listen to lots of podcasts from all different walks of life. And it focuses on people's experiences with their eyewitness accounts of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. The story, and it was over long, was so convoluted. It was filled with so much detail that halfway through it, I'm like, there's no way in hell any of this happened. No one would be able to recollect anything like that and tell a story of an encounter with a large, hairy bipedal creature in an instance of however long the encounter happened. There's no way in hell that you could really stretch that out for over an hour and have it be believable. And I know some people will probably take me to task from that and say, oh, well, no, I can remember everything and all that. No, you can't. And Steve, you deal with people in this world, in this realm, on a daily basis. You're not as good as you think it is. And when you start to tell a story that probably could be encapsulated into 10, 12 minutes tops, when you're going on and on and on and on and on, there has to be embellishment. And the reason that I have an issue with it is the podcast passes this off as these things really happened. This is evidence of Bigfoot. And I think that hurts the real researchers in the community, the people who are taking this seriously, who are doing and putting in the work. That, okay, I'll use, unfortunate example, Steve, I'm going to use you. You don't have any experience like this guy was just saying. The 3 other ones that I listened to, I'm sure if I called Paul, I could ask him, what's the most fantastic thing you've ever seen or heard or recorded? None of it touches any of that. And that just drives me insane in all walks of the paranormal. Tonight we happen to be talking about, Bigfoot. I can't get over how people, and I hope to God they're not making money off of any of this, but it really taints the entire community, and it makes people who might, maybe like me, who happens to be a pretty open-minded guy and willing to listen and willing to check things out, it runs the risk of those people who could be champions for investigation to completely shut off and go, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to listen to anybody about this again.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. It does become very discouraging a lot of times when you hear all these stories that, people are fantastic. And you're right. They've had a roadside crossing, yet they can tell you everything about the creature. Oh, well, its feet were this, its hair were that. And that to me usually is a sign the person is lying about it. Years ago, I had this guy who told me 2 stories. And the second story was he was on a bus, literally, and he saw one in the field and he drove by it. And I asked him how long was their sighting for. He says, oh, it's about 40 seconds. Well, even a bus traveling at 30 miles an hour, you're only going to be like 5 second, frame of, field of vision. But this guy could incite all this exactness of, what it looked like, its hair color, its eyes, its face, everything. Now, unless you're really an incredible observer, which I do not believe he was, some of the stuff, and it's possible the mind is filling in the blanks in this case. But I don't, given the fact of what happened before, I don't believe him at all. But But yeah,
this
that was
one, and I'll give everybody the gist of this. It was a guy who was camping out, and the night before this event, they had heard some noises, and they were near a known investigator that ran a little general store or something. So he went down and asked the guy, and the guy said, "No, I wouldn't believe the sounds that you heard would be Sasquatch related." But then the next day, or the same day, he goes and talks to this guy. He decides to go on a walk with his dog and runs across what he believes to be a Bigfoot. And it's exactly what you were just saying. Suddenly, he's describing its hands. This thing is sitting in the crook of a tree, and he's talking about how its one eye would reflect while the other one didn't. And okay, all right, so maybe that's possible that happened. But now the story proceeds to go into how it turned and looked at him and taking pictures, which were not shared anywhere. There were no links. There was no nothing. There was no any follow-up to these pictures that he's taking of this creature. Meanwhile, the dog's not doing anything, which I don't know what kind of dog wouldn't react to. I mean, if a squirrel comes into my yard, I've got a golden retriever. That thing is hell on wheels after a squirrel, or birds. I mean, but anyway, so I'm going to put that on the shelf and say, okay, maybe that's a possibility. The dog's not paying attention, doesn't see this thing. So the story continues, and now he's describing its facial hair and its hair and how big it is up in this tree. And I'm like, okay, I'm buying it. I'm buying it. I'm buying it. He decides that, well, maybe it's time to go home and leave this creature where it is. And he proceeds to leave and comes across a little rocky outcrop. He talks about this boulder, and he's feeling like, something's looking at him. Now, again, I'm starting to say, if I'm walking around in the woods, not expecting to see something like that, sure, I might have that rational side to take a picture, but the other is going to be like, is this thing going to rip my arms off and beat me in the head with it? I don't think I would have as calm demeanor as this guy is saying he has. But now here he is in a different area, and he kind of notices something funny about this rock. And all of a sudden, he sees a hand. And the creature is now crawling up over the rock to get a better look at him. And now he's talking to it. He's calling it big guy. And he's calling it, hey, dude, I'm not here to hurt you. He's having this whole conversation that he's saying. And I'm okay. Now I'm like, okay, this never happened. There's just no way in hell that this happened. And long story short, so I'm already tuned out halfway, but I'm still listening to it. He gets back to his campsite, and everybody's like, "Oh, wow, where you been? What's going on?" And he was like, "I don't know. I just went on that hike, and I was only gone for a couple hours." And they all say, "No, you were gone for 6 hours."
Oh boy.
Right, and I'm like, going, "Okay, how many? What? Where'd you get the mushrooms?" But this is the best part. Went on for another 33 minutes after all of this. And I'm like going, oh, dear Lord. So I looked into the podcast. And again, I go back to, this was supposed to be serious discussion, serious sightings. And I'm like, okay, if this is really what's going on out there, apparently I have been good enough to myself to not pay attention to any of that and to talk to people, as I've already said before, who are serious about this. And then like I said, I started going down a rabbit hole, and I started looking at other things that, okay, if this now in clear voice at this length of time, and the story that this guy is telling is complete and utter garbage, is it possible that a lot of things that I was considering before also are? And that's really kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about. And anybody wants to say, hey, no, I think you're off base on this, I'd like to spend time discussing a little bit of that. But I wanted to give everybody the basis. I know that was a lot of talking, but
it's a great
you know what I mean? It's like I look at stuff like that and then go, okay, let's review all the other stuff that we've talked about, or at least I have. Is it possible that the same thing was happening there? I just didn't accept it for that because it wasn't a long form narrative of what someone was claiming to be the truth?
That's a good question. And I can understand where, people that have this kind of critical thing, especially like journalists, and that's essentially what you are. You're a broadcaster. You're thinking to yourself, my God, in looking at how ridiculous, am I looking at this thing the whole wrong way? And I don't know. We'll do is we'll have people. We'll open up the phone lines and we'll have people. We'll talk about it. If people want to call in, which we can do now, or if people want to, chat, throw a question in or opinion in, or please do. My thing would be where's the source coming from? Because what, you can look at the BFRO site. And I have access to the backside of that. So I see a lot of different reports, and some are crazy, some are not. Some are, very credible, some are not.
Well, that's what I like about Mark's point, Steve, is how can, most sightings can be explained in one paragraph. Now, how can you go on for 45 minutes talking about what you saw during now let me ask Mark this question. Was the narrative being solely provided by the gentleman, espousing this experience, or was the host involving questions or anything like that?
No host. It was over an hour of this person, and again the subsequent ones that I listened to. It was open mic night. It was gotcha. Here you have the reins. Tell us what happened. And no questions, no prodding, no real, thought gone into it. It was just, hey, tell us your campfire story, which I have no problems with. If that's what you want to present it as, but don't come and grab me and say, hey, I got to tell you this story. Look, I've been to you. It's funny, Chris, when you mentioned it's cold. I went outside today. It's 30 degrees, and I'm like, man, is it cold? And I had to remind myself, I've been in minus 28 weather up in Algonquin Provincial Park, and then I'm like, no, it's not cold. Okay, it's 31 degrees out. You're fine.
Right.
But then that might just in this discussion reminds me of when I've come across moose out in the middle of a trip. I can remember seeing all these things, or especially when they come up on you and you're not paying attention and you just notice it. I can sort of tell you those stories of when it happened, but not into the length of detail. And quite frankly, even if you've never seen a moose in real life up close, they're a hell of a lot bigger than they look. And even a moose is startling. And that's why I hear these. And again, there were other, other stories on this podcast where I'm like listening to these people going, no human being would react that way. And I guess maybe that's hyperbole or I'm being judgmental. But knowing as many people as I do in my field of work, what I do on a day-to-day basis, and the shows that I've had, no one has ever told me a story like that where they didn't add to the end of it, and I almost, crap my pants.
Right. So let me see. To me, it would be the source. That particular podcast, if they're always saying, oh, let's tell your campfire story. And they always have these incredible stories that last an hour. Perhaps they're not really people calling in, but it's already set to go.
Yeah.
Sure.
Scripted, maybe.
Yeah, scripted. We've talked about that before, that a lot of, I've listened to some shows where some of the witnesses sound very scripted. Yeah. And to me, it's amazing that these shows get the number of eyewitness reports that they do. Like, really? I mean, I look what comes in from New York and the surrounding states to the BFRO, and the vast majority of them are not even eyewitness testimonies. There's audibles and, maybe tracks or maybe other stuff or tree knocks or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the actual number of incredible sightings are very, very extremely low. So my point would be to that is, how are they getting all these incredible, reports week after week after week? And what they'll tell you is, oh, well, we got 52,000 subscribers, or we got And that's why. No, that's not why. Because at my peak, I never got too many incredible stories.
Right.
I got some credible stories. Like a few weeks ago, we had on Jay Fritz, who talked, and we talked more about what had happened after him and how he felt about it, rather than the actual. And Mick just came up with a great term. I love it. Scriptozoology. I love it. And perhaps a new
that is going to be stolen. That is terrific.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that. In fact, I think I'll have a new hashtag for this show, and that's hashtag no scriptozoology. It's pretty damn good.
Wonderful, Mick. Wonderful.
Good show.
That's great.
We'll give you credit for that one, brother.
And that's where I was, when I was leaving myself. Oh, God, does he still have a show, by the way?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. He finally decided to handle all his legal problems. Anyway, I didn't say that out loud. But so this is where this led me to, because I was a huge fan of what I knew them as the Sierra Sounds.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by it when I first heard it, and was like, boy, this is something. And I'm looking back, and I'm also taking in other things, and I've had conversations with people. And like I said, let me revisit this, and let's look at the facts of what's actually going on there, without getting into the whole breakdown of what I think his name was it Nelson Scott? C. Nelson Scott?
Scott Nelson. Yep.
Scott Nelson. Okay, so I was close.
Language.
We can get into that, and the samurai chat and all that kind of thing. It kind of, as I always accepted it, now I'm looking at it through the lens of what I just listened to on this podcast, and I'm like going, as interesting as this is, and as much as I want to give leeway and say, okay, the possibilities are there. Is it possible that these guys went into the Sierra Nevadas and had a camp there and encountered some strange things and happened to be able to record them and go back to the location on multiple times and bring in a journalist and all this sorts of stuff? Okay, I'm willing to give them that benefit of the doubt of maybe that really did happen. But now I'm looking at this and saying to myself, okay, if I'm really serious about this, if I am Steve Kulls, if I am friend Ron Bowles from the BRFO, if I'm Chris, if I'm anybody who's listening right now, if I'm Joe, and I know that I am sitting on what is basically a gold mine of biology, a gold mine of history, is the most I'm going to do make some recordings and leave it at that and just say, boy, we have this camp and there's some really interesting sounds up there, and not share this discovery and allow other people to get up there and check things out. There's no way in hell anybody who was sitting on that kind of evidence would not share that discovery, which would be probably the biggest discovery in the history of mankind. I mean, what are the three big ones, right? What happens when we die? Are we alone in the universe? I'll throw in that term. And believe you've got concrete proof, but the most you're going to do is make some recordings and never let anybody go up there for what reason? And now I don't want to be soured on the whole thing, but I'm totally soured on that. So of course then I'm doing, more of a deeper dive into the lesser deeper dive that I did when I looked into it before. And I'm starting to say, okay, how much more of this stuff is complete garbage? Now, whether or not people want to believe the Patterson-Gimlin film, I'm not going to get into the gate and the size and the people who have looked at that. And this is why we think whatever, Okay. What I do know is that those gentlemen who made that video or that movie told everybody exactly where they were, whether it was real or not, shared it with everybody that they could, allowed it to be looked at, and with how many different places that have broken it down, and it's well, we're going to speed it up, reverse, whatever. That's always happened. They didn't claim. They let everybody in instead of these guys who are saying, no, this is exactly where it's happening. We can take you there. We know they're going to come back. Well, that's all you did was record it, and then it just goes away. Now I'm calling BS. I'm calling BS on the Scott Nelson who's looking at it, knowing a little bit more about his background, that he is not a linguistics expert. Maybe is related to linguistics, but it's linguistics over trying to decipher languages over a lot of noise and combat and the radio waves and all that kind of stuff. He's basically made up his own alphabet. And I'm like going, okay, yeah, you know what? There's no way that's legit. And I just, oh God, I'm questioning everything all over again, Steve.
So let me ask you, let me kind of set your mind kind of at ease about certain things. And I know you now, the way I understood it was that they were hearing these incredible things, and they did go to somebody, a journalist by the name of Al Berry, and they brought him out there, and Al Berry recorded them at first. So to me, they did bring in a third party to record the Sierra Sounds. And the reason why, because they spent a lot of time there. So you would assume that they would have a lot of detail. And they did. I don't know if you've ever listened to the 2 volumes of the Sierra Sounds. The first one was narrated by Jonathan Frakes. The second one was narrated by Ron Moorhead. I don't know if you've ever heard the entire discs of those.
Oh, yeah. No, I've got them. And okay. I paid for them legally. I will say that.
Yeah, myself as well. So I think that there was a third party there. I can understand that's their hunting lodge. They don't want people tromping through there. Because what happens, for example, I was very public with some Bigfoot groups about my research area after I had my sighting in 2011 and after sighting in 2012, and people started to interlope into the area in 2013. And guess what happened? Everything dried up. So you have to be careful about your own sighting areas. If you have an area where there's evidence, and maybe for Ron Moorhead or for wherever, maybe the sounds were enough and the interactions they had were enough. I don't want to bother them. Right. They're deep in the woods, they're whatever. So I think that's part of it. To me, there's a lot more logical explanation. Like, well, they did bring somebody in. They brought in this journalist, Al Berry. So to me, they didn't just hide it and say, oh, we have these sounds that are in the high Sierras and that's it. They did bring that third party in to kind of corroborate the story. I totally, I understand that. But again, as far as the breakdowns,
but all of a sudden it just stopped. Okay, they get these sounds and then nothing.
Well,
nothing.
There was
again, no one else has reported anything similar to this or recorded anything similar to this. Everything happened in this one small location, and it's like, oh, I don't know. I can't buy it anymore. I did for years.
So here's the interesting thing. I was feeling that way too until these 2 guys down in Oklahoma. I'm not even sure where this was. We know, Chris knows the one gentleman who's been on this show before, Randy Harrington.
Yeah.
And Shane Carpenter, not to be mixed up with Scott Carpenter. This is another Carpenter.
Different, yeah.
Apparently have recorded some audio recordings, and they're trying to now get thermal in the area. Yeah. But apparently they have possibly recorded stuff very similar to the Sierra Sounds. And that is actually being evaluated by Scott Nelson at this point in time to see if there's similarities. But they apparently played them once at this conference, and Scott Nelson's son was listening to it and ran out and got his dad and said, holy crap, you got to listen to this. This sounds just like the Sierra Sounds.
No,
so
but again,
we'll see what happens.
And again, I'm not. I told you this is where we were going to go.
Yeah.
How much of that was faked, based on the knowledge that they heard and knew how many people were buying that story? Well, what's the way to put yourself on the map for any kind of Bigfoot sighting?
Sure.
Replicate the same darn thing. And again, but they already told us from those, whatever universe, no human being could replicate these sounds.
Right.
Michael Winslow. Michael Winslow, right? I mean, yes, there are people who can do that, for crying out loud. And especially with the technology that we have today, they can do anything they want on their computer. You were just playing around with changing your voice.
Right.
There's absolutely a million ways you can do it.
But, here's the issue. And here's a very good issue, is that you can be jaded now. You don't want to believe anything. And now you're afraid to believe anything because of that one story. So
right. And that's where I want to be careful.
Right.
With what I'm saying, because again, I don't want to take everybody and not believe everybody and be the skeptic on the wall.
Right. Yeah. He even said, John Swan just asked Mark, "Do you believe in anything?" But
Mark does have a point, though, Steve. I mean,
very, very good points. But it
kind of strains credibility when you have somebody that has this super great area and they record these unknown sounds, and then it doesn't go any further. I mean, did we put trail cameras out there? Did we set up a hide in a tree?
But before they were commercialized, everybody's got to remember, before the Sierra Sounds were commercialized, and this is where my history of the history of the mystery comes in.
Yeah.
Was in actuality, this is back in 74, 73, 72, 73, 74, 75.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I think 77 or 78 that a show called In Search Of picked up on.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm sure after the In Search Of episode where they played some of these noise sounds for the first time.
Yeah.
Then perhaps Ron was approached by somebody to say, "Hey, listen, we'd like to do this nice professional outlay of this," and so on and so forth. Which, of course, at that point, why wouldn't you do that at that point? My point is that the Sierra Sounds weren't put out there until the 80s, the late 80s, and they have been around for 15 years.
Yeah,
20 years.
My point goes back to, okay, so now we're into the 80s. We've been through the In Search Ofs. There's been documentaries. They've got the Ivan Sanderson, what have yous, but it's, the movies are out there. It's, the whole idea of Bigfoot is being commercialized. These guys never once thought to say, "Hey, let's go get Grover Krantz. Let's go get somebody else and bring him up here." You know what I mean? Right. It's like,
I get that.
You start to go, okay, we bring in some journalist who's probably going to go along for the ride. I don't know. I don't know his whole background. I'm sure was a wonderful guy and a stand-up guy. But it's all of a sudden, this credibility is this like sliding away. It's like you knew you were sitting on a gold mine, according to you, and you didn't bring any other experts in. You didn't go back because you were worried about your hunting camp. Come on. The Sierras are pretty big, and those animals are going to go other places. It's just those little loopholes here. Did this really happen?
Well, it is a fact that Ron did approach in the 70s Dr. Arlen Curlin. Again, he's a professor of electrical engineering. According to the site, Dr. Lynn's complete report on the Sierra Sounds was given at a UBC conference held in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1978. again, this is examining the sounds of it. So, it was sent to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
For the original Legend Made Science documentary done by Donald Hijack. So, and I know, I know it's tough to take the cynicism out of things. And I always said that, even in my latest book, I put up some questions about that I don't think any piece of Bigfoot evidence per se is beyond criticism of some sort, including my own stuff, of course. It's very tough to sit, but the one thing you don't want to be is, look at everything now with, oh, this can't be, and it's tough. You listen to this particular channel and hear these stories over a period of time, and begin to realize that, hey, this is all a bunch of baloney. I'm sure, just like people who've watched Expedition Bigfoot, people who've watched, Mountain Monsters realizing it wasn't real.
Yeah.
How about those people that tuned into the Discovery Channel for the Megalodon special, which was garbage, or the Mermaid special, which was garbage. And they're still doing it to some extent. Every once in a while, they'll throw out a documentary and you start to realize that the doctor or the professor that's talking is an actor.
Yeah.
But they're easy to spot because they're scripted.
Right.
And, for me, they're easy to pick out. And I think that's what you did, was realize this guy talking about this for 1 hour on his own, on a quote unquote call-in, seemed to be very scripted.
And I guess, to answer, and I don't remember if you said it in chat, does he believe in anything? Yeah, I do. I believe in things that are worth believing in. I guess it sounds a little crass, but if these things are happening, the skeptical side of me does come out and say, okay, why did it suddenly stop? Why hasn't anybody else ever? Okay, now we've got this Oklahoma example. This has never happened anywhere else that anybody has recorded. With the amount of people who are out there reporting these things now, with the availability of being able to report, in a number of different places, including BFRO, these things were so focused on one little area that it makes it, to me, even harder to believe that if there is any other kind of language reporting any of this, with the thousands and thousands and thousands of reports that are out there, face-to-face reports, or reports of sightings or noises or that sort of thing. None of the stuff that a lot of people report happened really at any level of notoriety or notability in the Sierra Sounds, but they happen all over the place. And the exact opposite, where we're hearing wood knocks or reports of this or reports of howls. So one group of these wood apes are still stuck in howling and banging on rocks and trees, but this one little cluster over here has what is being purported as a functional and recognizable language.
Well, again,
that to me is amazing.
Well, I would not necessarily put Scott Nelson's summation involved in that. Take that out of the system. Do you hear knocking and clacking and stuff on the Sierra Sounds? Absolutely.
Well, that's what I said. So, I mean, it does happen.
So if you take Scott Nelson out of the picture, just like, you find, you take Melba Ketchum out of the example. You take these people that are interloping into existing data, like M.K. Davis and the Patterson-Gimlin massacre. These people are interloping and trying to spin it for their own good. I would take Nelson's stuff and move that out. and just look upon the Sierra Sounds as the Sierra Sounds, not anything else.
But then again, that's my question still stands. It only happened in this one portion of an extremely large country, and it doesn't happen anywhere else other than this.
But there have been people that have reported having sounds similar to the Sierra Sounds. They just don't have the benefit of having a digital recorder.
Well, then we go down the rabbit hole of who's playing that game of, hey, well, I heard it, so I can say that too. You know, I mean, I was in the Stanley Hotel or the Stanley Hotel.
I don't disagree. There's really a great example of some audible pareidolia.
Yeah.
And I won't necessarily disagree with that, but there were a lot of different sounds that were captured on those Sierra Sounds. There were whistles, pops, grunts, howls, and
knockings,
of course,
stuff.
Knockings.
Yeah.
So there was a whole full gambit of stuff. Yeah. And, you know,
I'm peeing in everybody's Wheaties tonight. I know that. But,
and I'm not all right. Yeah.
Like I said, it's not something that I would never consider, because I think things like this, if we want to throw it in paranormal, cryptozoology, when it comes to Sasquatch, Bigfoot, what have you, there seems to be a little bit more, and I'll throw UFO or whatever they call them now, UAPs. There seems to be a group of people that are a little bit more rational, that research it. So there always will be that with me, that, okay, I'm going to take Steve seriously. I'm going to take these guys seriously. I'm going to listen to everybody. I mean, that's what I do. And that's what I did and still do as a show host. But my podcast is completely different now, but I still get lots of stories about Bigfoot. In that capacity, I just read what I'm given. I don't have any comment about it, whether I believe it or not, because it's not the nature of the podcast. But there's evolution with the way people are investigating. There's evolution with the way that people are communicating their stories. Nothing outside of this one that you just mentioned, I keep repeating myself, is as fantastical as what was going on in the 70s. And you see that in all branches of the paranormal activity and the debunking that they've done with all that kind of stuff. But the credibility of people who see these things tend to be what I would consider rational human beings who saw or heard something extraordinary out in the wilderness. But then there's the other folks who, like I said in the beginning of this, that are ruining it for everybody else. Well, they'll say, well, I know where there's a graveyard. Well, let's go look at the bones. Well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to disrupt upset the Bigfoot community. Oh, for crying out loud. Yes, you should. And yes, you would if there was anything really there.
Yep. There's a chance to get a body, we'd sure get one.
Sure. Right. I want a bunch of nuts running around in the woods with 30-30s, taking pot shots or whatever they can. Of course not. But even any extension of that kind of research, look at how many people are in BFRO that would jump at the chance to go and spend time in that area. I don't even know if BFRO ever has gone on any expedition in that area. I would think that if there was a group of creatures, sophisticated, even though it is, whatever we're coming up on, almost 50 years ago, right? Yeah. That you would still go back to that same area. If those things existed there, sure, they might have migrated away if they existed in the first place. But if not, why wouldn't other like creatures still be living there?
So my whole purpose is that does the Sierra Sounds on the premise sound overly that incredible? To me, it doesn't. And I think there are going to be flaps where you find an area, especially remote like the High Sierras, where you may actually encounter something for a small time. I did myself between 2010 to 2012. Where it culminated into me having two separate sightings a year apart. One of an 8-foot Sasquatch, one of a 5.5, 5-foot one. it happens. And then it sounds like an incredible tale, but I'm spending a lot of time in a particular area. And that's apparently what's going on with Harrington and Carpenter now, is they have this property where there's some activity been going on, some regular activity. So they staked it out for quite some time. Just like the Sierra Sounds, they're there for, a couple of months a year, or a month a year, whatever. And they happen to stumble across this. Does it sound incredible? I don't think so. I think that there are times when, but then you have people like the Carter Farm, where, they're knocking on the door asking for garlic, and they're calling it a habituation, and they're leaving it notes, and it's leaving it notes back, and plus other crap that kills that credibility. So I think it's possible to have these pockets. What you have to understand that back in the 70s, there was very few people. There wasn't social media. So was this happening elsewhere? Maybe, maybe not. But these are rare circumstances. So perhaps
education has come a long way on these on the ability to do the research and techniques. Back in the 70s, when Moorhead and the other guys were recording, that was considered, oh my God, this is cutting edge research. Right. Because, at that time, I'm fairly certain they didn't have game cameras. If they
had
did,
trap cameras.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't have been anything night vision in it,
Correct.
But by recording, doing those recordings, that was probably considered cutting edge research at that time. And, you can't really fault them for it. But
how did they see? This is where this is where I'm going. I'm already thinking about this, and it's driving me crazy.
No, go ahead, man.
So how did they know that on that particular trip, these things were going to come? And as soon as that trip was over, they left. That's interesting. How many other times did they go up there that we never really talk about that they didn't hear anything? But it just so
for a while. If you listen to the narration, if you listen to the narration, it wasn't something that just started, something that was gradual.
Right.
So then what they do is on their next trip out, they talk to Al Berry, and Al Berry brings his recording equipment up
there. And Al never asks to go back.
I believe he did go back for years. He was another firm believer in what had happened there. Because he experienced.
That makes me want to believe him, or if that makes me think he's full of stuff too.
Well, again, a third party to that, he could have went up there and found nothing, and that would have been the
there is something to the secrecy too that I can kind of relate to. If you've got something going on and it's really good, you don't want everybody and his brother tromping through there. But now they could have contacted, I'm with you, they could have contacted Grover Krantz or somebody like that and got them up there, and I'm sure he would have went. Grover was head over heels for Bigfoot. He was a firm believer. Never seen one. He's still a firm believer in the creature.
But then again, everything was done on pen and paper.
Yeah, that's right.
You would have to write a letter or find a telephone number and talk and convince somebody to go out there.
They had a Bigfoot letter, a Bigfoot mailer that you could get if you sent them a stamped self-addressed envelope, and they would send you a printed copy of the Bigfoot letter for information. That was cutting edge back then. But the different types of what
I believe say about the Sierra Sounds, and I don't think that he was in the camp of that. Again, I'd have to go look it up, and Steve, you would know better than I. But again, I'm beating a dead horse here. I come back to why I did my show, wanting to talk to credible people, and now I guess if I ever resurrect the Edge of the Unknown in any shape or form, how much is this tainted the way that I actually should be keeping an open mind when I keep thinking back to if you knew you had it, you found what could possibly be a missing link, you didn't do more than you really ought to have. But sorry.
And Mick says if they release a Peel Sessions version of Sierra Sounds, I have no idea what that is.
That would be now. I would love to see if there's. Well, I don't even know if John Peel's still alive, but very famous recording artist. That would be an unbelievable way to look at this, and I would give it a second or third or fourth or fifth go around if something like that could be brought into the mix.
Right, but I think that. If it wanted to be capitalized, it would have been brought out a lot sooner, a lot, at the peak of, them selling the Sierra Sounds on CD. But I don't know. Interesting. Kaiju Ninja asked the question, would you have Ron on your show?
Would I have if I could have gotten Ron on my show? Sure, I would. I had anybody on. I mean, we can
always make that happen. I met Ron Moorhead, actually.
Yeah.
I've actually met him. Seems like a legit dude telling a story. So it's hard to tell.
I don't do the show anymore.
Yeah.
But Steve, you've been on for crying out loud. I started the network and you were part of that. I had a woman on the show. That's what I used to tell everybody. She was on only for an hour. Thank God. It was a woman. What the hell was her name? Olga Horvath wrote a book about a demon poodle that she brought into her family that gave her husband cancer and her daughter. Yeah, they blamed everything that went wrong in their family on this poor effing dog.
I would have, if she gave her husband fleas, I would have understood it.
But. So that's the kind of show that I had where I had all kinds of different walks of life people in there. And again, just recently it's been sticking in my craw because for whatever reason, right. I've been rejuvenated with Bigfoot stories. I actually have a podcast coming out about some reportedly true stories of people encountering monsters, and a Bigfoot story happened to be in there. So it's been on my mind, and I'm just like, okay, am I being too much of a tight ass about this, or am I just starting to question things in a completely different way?
I will say this: I think it takes some chops to give it over to a doctor like Lynn Kerlin, or giving it over to Texas A&M's, acoustic laboratory. I think that's got some chops and that's got some merit to it, rather than just putting it out there saying, okay, here it is. So at least to me, there's some level of trying to validate it, because they could have come back. If they were hoaxed, they would have come back and said, hey, we don't believe they're real, would have ruined them. So I think that was pretty chopsy if it was a hoax piece of audio, because the last thing a true hoaxer wants to do is turn it over to somebody that's going to analyze it that could tear it all apart. So I think that has some merit. But anyway, Chris, do we want to try the call in line?
Well, I think might as well, hopefully.
So I'm going to add that to the call-in line is now open, but you guys need to know the number.
If anybody wants to call in, yeah.
Yes, the new number, the call-in line is 518-692-4518. 518-692-4518. We're live, and the call-in number only works when we're live. Yeah. So here we are. If somebody wants to call in, we're here. So let's hope this all works out pretty well.
But, the Sierra Sounds has been one of the big questions for me over the years. I'm just fascinated by it. I really am. I've never heard anything like it, ever. It is cool. There are some knockings, that does kind of relate to common stories. People maybe, tree knock and then get a response. So, right. That's one thing that I did like about it. But at the time, though, I think, Mark makes a good point. It strains credibility that more wasn't done. But at that time, I believe Ron needs to get a little past there, because that was pretty cutting edge research, to take a tape recorder up there and microphone and record these sounds was pretty cool. And, but, there was a thing in the chat. Somebody made a point that hunters usually shoot animals rather than record them.
That is true. They don't normally go out to do that. Yeah, it's a totally different kind of experience in the woods. I'll give them that.
But understood they found the tracks before they heard the sound. So it may have been like, well,
I don't want to get into a debate about kill or no kill, but
right.
Yeah, if they're all up there with high power rifles, why didn't one plug one? I mean, somebody should have plugged one.
Michael asked.
That I'm not going to comment on because, like I said, I would never want. I would never encourage that to just let's all
no, not at all, not at all.
Now all of a sudden it looks like the Dawn of the Dead, where there's just a bunch of bikers running around shooting at everything that moves.
So does anybody want to try calling in? The call-in line is 518-692-4518. If you call in, we just ask that you mute your YouTube channel so we don't get an echo.
Yeah, Mark's an ass. I
mean, I don't care if somebody wants to challenge me on something. I don't care. I agree, Lockbeard, that Ron has subscribed to like the quantum physics type of thing. And, to me, that
it's a little out there. Yeah.
It's a little out there. It's not.
Yeah. And I can't remember his name. Oh my goodness. Really great guy. He came on a number of times. Actually, I think he was on a couple of different shows. Steve, you would know him. He's in Pennsylvania. He does a lot more in UFOs and UAMs.
Stan Gordon. Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
And the caller from the 270 area code, you're on Squatch-D TV. Hello, and congratulations on being the first caller.
Yeah.
Jay Fritz, can you hear me?
Hey, Jay, how are you? We can hear you.
Hey.
I'd like to ask Mark, has he ever spoken to someone that has seen one of these creatures close up, like Joe or Jeff or myself?
I've spoken to a number of people. I couldn't give you every single one of their names.
I'm hanging up now.
Where I would have to jog my memory, but obviously I've talked to Steve, I've talked to Ron Bowles, I've talked to Jim Sherman, a couple of other folks from BFRO, and there's an Ohio organization that I remember talking to, where some of their folks said that yes, they had experiences of either up close or well enough to be in the vicinity of knowing that what they were looking at was not a human, but also something that they'd never encountered before. In the vicinity of knowing that what they were looking at was
Yep. Jay, you might want to just mute your YouTube a bit. It's coming back a little bit.
Jay, you might want to just mute your YouTube a bit.
Oh, it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. There we go.
No problem.
Oh, we lost him.
We lost him.
Maybe he'll call
because
back.
I mean, I've talked to. I just disclosed that I had a woman who said her dog was a demon. But sure, and again, the folks that I have had been goodly enough to chat with or to have on the show or write in or call when I had my guests on. There's been lots of people who have said that they've seen strange stuff in the woods. There's lots of people who have heard strange noises. I've heard plenty of strange noises. For crying out loud, I've got a great horned owl in my backyard. And for the first 10 minutes of listening to it, I was convincing myself it was a guy out there because I'm like, Jesus, that doesn't sound real.
Yeah, they are.
And then I went on, and then I saw it and was like, wow, that's exactly the way it's supposed to sound.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I heard barred owls all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And on one night I heard this different type of hooting. I'm going, that's a great horned owl. Because it was just completely, and let me just double check. And I got my, Jason, sorry, I didn't realize I was still on the phone. Okay. Cool beans, Jay. Hey, you know what? Thanks for calling in. You win the prize for being the first caller. But if anybody else wants to call in, it's 518-692-4518.
We appreciate you, Jay.
Scrolling. Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad the system works, man. That's awesome.
Yes, this is pretty cool, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, sir.
The nice thing is we can call out on it too. So, maybe we should call Tom Biscardi.
That's cool. Kudos.
I think
maybe Tom calling now.
And here, caller from the 541 area code. You're on Squatch-D TV. Welcome.
Hi, how are you doing, Steve?
Doing wonderful. Who's this?
This is Paul Daglian.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
Hey, Paul.
I'm pretty well. And I just wanted to say, I understand what your guest points are, but if Ron Moorhead is hoaxing this stuff, he's an absolute genius.
That may be so.
And he may be an absolute genius, but I mean, it really is. It would be, I mean, because his whole demeanor comes across as so sincere.
Agreed.
And I have to look at that.
Yeah.
His demeanor. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I think he tells the story very slowly, deliberately, and with a lot of detail. Of course, the amount of time spent, experiencing things. I mean, and I know that's one of Mark's hangups is that this guy, had this sighting and he was being so descriptive about it. Now we're looking at people who have these kind of long-term type of things. But by counterbalance, my sighting was about 30 to 40 seconds. I couldn't tell you what its face looked like. I couldn't tell you what its feet looked like or what its knees looked like or anything like that. But I could see the silhouette of it. I could see it had long hair, and I could see it, its eyes were reflecting this dark orange, reddish type of glow back at me. And then it just turned and walked off. And, that's about the best I could tell you of the big one I had seen. The little one I saw a little bit better. It had long, I believe reddish brown hair. It could have been brown, but it appeared to be reddish brown to me. Long, and its arms were lanky, its legs were lanky. It wasn't a robust one like Patty, and it ran off very quick, very flowing, and that was that. But that one was only like a 10-second sighting. It was just really fleeting for a moment. And, so there's different, like here's a 10-second sighting. I could tell you more about the hair color and length and its body shape versus my 40-second one where I couldn't really see what it was, other than the eyes and the shape and the outline of it. So, it depends on a lot of different conditions, but it does sound like this gentleman's, sighting was that out of the podcast was kind of, scripted to be the best, but
I get all that. Yeah. But so. I'm just saying, as far as Ron goes, and I mean, I know what you're saying about these people that have these 45-second looks from a bus, and they can tell you the shape of the toes, how many toes, what their fingernail condition was,
Absolutely.
But those are obvious red flags and stuff. But with Moorhead, it's an extraordinary story, but it's just, I just have a very, very difficult time believing that Ron is intentionally lying about any of it, just going by gut instincts about it.
Yeah. And the same with, if you think of the, Patterson Gimlin film, how many have seen a short-haired Bigfoot? You got to kind of, is it something different about, I don't know. Maybe the hair's, as Dr. Melvin points out, the hair, it's just because we got a really good look at the head that the hair seems to be shorter. But in actuality, if you look at the body hair, it's probably long. It's just not as frayed as, some of the other ones. I don't know. The questions, that's the beautiful thing about this mystery. There are a lot of questions to be asked. I'm not saying that every high exalted piece of evidence, such as, as people consider, the Patterson Gimlin film or the Sierra Sounds, which seems to come in second as far as, people holding stuff in high regards. That doesn't mean we can't ask tough questions about them. I think we should. It serves us justice when we do, just to arbitrarily believe. And I think that's a good way to progress, because as an investigator, I can have a suspect in, say, a burglary or an arson or another type of crime that may look good on paper. Yeah, he's done this, he's done that, he's done this. This has got to be our guy. but that's a belief and it needs to be proved. And it may not turn out that because of my belief, I'm steering this investigation the wrong way. So you have to keep all your cards in play.
No, I think your guest is great. He raises a lot of excellent questions. There's no question about it.
Very good. Any questions for Mark? Mark is on the line and he can hear you.
Well, Mark, I guess the one thing I would ask is, and this is just a subjective thing, but what are your overall impressions at this juncture regarding the Patterson film?
Ooh,
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I'm sorry. Can you ask that again?
He wanted to know your opinion.
Yeah, Paul, can you ask that again?
Mark, what are your overall impressions at this point, in light of all your recent thoughts on Bigfoot and stuff? What do you think at this juncture about the Patterson-Gimlin film?
That's a good question. There's so much that has been bounced around with all of that. Bob Hieronymus and all the other things that have come out. The bouncing of a check, the guy's he's kind of been a screwball, blah blah blah. I mean, there's a lot of things happening there. From a physical standpoint, I don't have the expertise to say, yeah, that is the way that this would move. This is the way a human being would move. And I know they go back and forth on all that kind of thing. What I did say earlier is the credibility I had with it, which also kind of works two ways, is yes, they were going out to look for Bigfoot, and oh my God, they found it. That kind of hurts overall the story of that video or that film. But at the same time, there wasn't any, as I mentioned, he was clear about where he was going. Yeah, he said, this is where we took this. This is the exact same spot. We can take you back there. And there wasn't all the big mystery of it, other than the fact of, was it a guy in a monkey suit? So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying I'm still on the fence. I can't say it's not, but there's some going for it, and there's some things that are going against it.
Right. And I think we just lost Paul on the call here.
Yes.
Well, thanks for calling in anyway, Paul. We appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Good from hearing you, brother. So, again, if anybody wants to call in, the call-in line is 518-692-4518, 518-692-4518.
And how long are we going, Steve?
What's that?
How long are we going?
Usually we go to 11, but if you need to blow out of here, we got you covered.
Yeah, actually, I might have to do that. My bride is texting me, and my child is fully awake. So
okay, all right, my brother. Well, thanks for coming on. You've posed a lot of interesting questions, Joe. If you're around, I'll bring you back into the stream. So just turn your camera on when you're ready, and I'll bring you back into the stream.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Mark. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much for allowing me to ramble and be an ass on somebody else's show instead of my own. So.
Well, you know what, though? You bring up some very good questions, and that's what people don't understand. That's what an outsider person looking in at this mystery thinks a lot of times.
And you've given me a lot of good points to think about, and I'm sure some of the other stuff that's been brought up. It's worth looking at again and keep an open mind, and that's all we can do. And roll from there. Would never say no, but I'm not listening to that podcast ever again. That's all I know.
Yeah, and that's probably a wise thing. Mark, you take care, my brother. We'll be in touch.
You guys take care, man. Have a good rest of the show. Take care.
Thanks, Mark. See you, man.
So Mark is out. Joe is in.
Hey, Joe.
Actually, what I'm going to do is this real quick. That way we get the...
Yeah.
And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Jeff over from Pine Island Research as well, because he has some information more about the Harrington Carpenter audio recordings, and maybe he can enlighten us a little bit more. So let me just...
there has been so many... Of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film has been run through the ringer, and there's been so many shows trying... or attempting to debunk it. And I watched the one, I'm sure everybody has seen it, the one where they're showing Bob Hieronymus walking across a parking lot, and you see his arm swing. Then they try to match that up to the Bigfoot, and they say, hey, he has the exact walk, you know. Well, wait a minute now. When Bob is walking across the parking lot, he's walking pretty smooth, yeah, but he's still walking heel to toe. His heel is hitting the ground first. So when Patty, or this film subject in the Patterson Gimlin film, is walking,
Grass says they'll call in and say, sweet, now go right ahead.
Yeah, the ball of the foot is striking the ground first, then the heel's going down. So that's kind of, they throw that stuff out and they say, oh yeah, this is it. This is a direct match to the walk, when it's obviously not.
No.
And if you're going to be skeptical, we also have to be skeptical of the debunking.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I already threw out anything that Bob Hieronymus and all that had to say as soon as I saw where something as simple as what the frickin' suit was made from changed. Changed.
Yeah.
First, the original suit was supposed to be made from green horsehide.
Yeah.
And a football helmet with a mask or whatever formed around it with a thing. And then, all of a sudden, no. The suit was made by Philip Morris. Hold up. What?
Right.
So as soon as that, I'm like, no. I can't believe anything about this part you're trying to debunk. Sorry, you just lost me. You're right.
It's for those people that are interested in that.
Hey, caller from the 918 area code. You're on Squatch-D TV. We got Chris, Joe, and Jeff all here in the chat. How are you tonight?
Hello, this is Sasquatch, and I want to say that Patty set unrealistic beauty standard for other Sasquatches.
That's very true. She sure has.
It's not all what you see on TV and film is not real and can be hurtful to some Sasquatches.
Well, that's very true. And perhaps, let me go over here and ask. The Sasquatch agrees with you that Patty's kind of hot. So there you go. Thanks for calling in.
Good night, gentlemen.
Okay. Somebody with a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
It's good. Always welcome to.
We're okay with good humor. So that's
yes.
Fun.
Look, guys, come on. Everybody can admit it. With this freaking phenomenon, you have to have a sense of humor. You have to. Sorry.
Especially if your name's Chris Noel.
Anyway,
right. And I give that 5 porcupines.
It's a Sasquatch, not a porcupine.
Anyway, Jeff, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Jeff.
Thanks, Steve and Chris. Hey, Joe.
Jeff's probably wondering what the hell he walked into.
Yeah. Well, I had a little bit of an idea, but
Helton said Philip Morris used to make my cigarettes when I smoked. Wrong Philip Morris, unfortunately.
Yeah, different one. But yeah, that's the thing. If anybody's interested in the Bob Hieronymus story about that, just type in a Google search somewhere. The 23 reasons Bob Hieronymus was not Bigfoot. Just type that into your Google search, and you'll come up with some interesting facts, like him changing the story about the suit. The suit goes from being one thing to something completely different. It's just, and whatever his story changes to suit the moment. Whatever sounds best for this moment, that's what it goes to. And I can't fault him because I don't know. I wasn't there that day. I have no idea if Bob Hieronymus was in a suit or not. But his story was not consistent, and I can fault him for that. I'm sorry, Bob. You can't go from horsehide to being a Philip Morris synthetic fur suit and expect people to find that credible.
I'm trying to find that actually, but Jeff, very interesting that the whole Sierra Sounds, and I had to bring out the Harrington Carpenter audio as well.
26 reasons, Steve. I'm sorry.
I was wondering
26
why.
reasons. Yeah, it's on the Amazon. It shows up on Amazon reviews here too. Where's it at? If it's not being taken off, where is it at?
Oh, I got it right here.
Oh man, it's just a big long list, and they nail it. I mean, they nail it every.
There you go.
Yeah, that's it. And that's been copied and pasted elsewhere online. And a lot of the big ones were like Bob didn't know, he got the filming location wrong.
Yep. Well, anyway, Jeff,
yeah,
I want to get Jeff to, and he's in here, I want to get him to enlighten us a little bit about what you know so far of the Harrington Carpenter, and obviously they're going to be on your show when it gets released and everything. That's really cool. So fire away, Jeff.
Well, I think one thing to note is that they say that their audio recording is over 15 minutes long. It was captured when they were both present at the property on a Thursday night. And the interesting thing about it is the next day they left that property because they were going to be speaking at a conference on a Saturday. Of course, they're pretty excited. They've captured this audio. They haven't had anybody look at it yet. And they were speaking about the different things that they've experienced on the property. And at this small conference, they played the I don't know if all of the audio or some of that audio, but the interesting part is that Scott Nelson was a keynote speaker at that conference. Scott was out in the lobby at somebody's vendor table having a conversation, and Scott Nelson's son, was in listening to Shane Carpenter and Randy Harrington speak. And he was hearing these recordings. He ran out in the lobby, got his dad, and said, "Dad, you've got to come in here right now." And Scott went in and listened to this. After Randy and Shane were done speaking, Scott met with them and explained who he was. They hadn't met him before. Scott said he was the one who dissected all of the Sierra sounds that Ron had released, or that had been released, and dissected them and established there was like 612, I don't know, let's just say over 600 distinct phonetics that are displayed in the Sierra sounds, between the chatter and the whoops and the screams and the whistles and the different vocalizations, that there were, you'll hear people describe it as like it's sounding like a Native American Ojibwe language, and he dissected these phonetics, not really understanding the language that was being spoken, but vowel pronunciations and things like that. And what he's doing is when he was talking to them, he convinced them to let him analyze their audio prior to them releasing it, and being able to compare it to the Sierra sounds. Meaning, like, let's say a minute and 30 seconds into the Sierra sounds, that phonetic display, 3 or 4 or 5 syllable display, you hear at 5 minutes and 12 seconds in on Scott and Randy. See if there were similarities that existed in these two recordings. which I think is an excellent place to start, because you reportedly have 2 different audio recordings from 2 different geographical locations, recorded decades apart from each other. And you've got the same guy who, Scott had a relationship with Ron and is friends with Ron, and Ron trusted him to do what he did. Now, the interesting thing is that you brought this up, Steve, is, and I think would be smart on Harrington and Carpenter's part not to just have Scott Nelson phonetically map these out, but utilize either Texas A&M's Bioacoustic Lab or University of North Carolina's Bioacoustic Lab, or maybe even more than one. Because one of the things I would be concerned about, being proactive about, if I was Harrington and Carpenter, is making sure that when you listen to the ambient background sounds of the Sierra sounds, a bioacoustic lab can establish that these sounds that Carpenter and Harrington have are recorded in a different location. They sound differently. The dither that's in the background, or that hissing sound that you hear in nature, if you went out in your backyard and did an audio recording, and I went in my backyard and did an audio recording, Texas A&M's lab can tell you for sure those were not recorded in the same spot. And you might just be listening to the breeze, so to speak.
Sure.
But I would want to establish that I am not putting out, let's say, quote, more of the Sierra recordings and claiming that they were recorded on my property,
Sure. Yep.
But so, I think they're taking the right approach. Now, here's the other thing that a person should probably consider is that when we talk about evidence like this, or proposed evidence, let's refer to it as, if you just had recordings from a property, a 15-minute recording from a property, what does that bring to the table, right? What's interesting is we're talking about a property in which they've identified to date 9 different trackways, in which one of the trackways was over 100 steps long, and they took 14 castings from. And all of these trackways they've taken castings from, and they've invited Meldrum and other people in the community to look at the casting. So, they aren't sitting on it like it's some golden egg they're not letting anybody look at.
Right.
So when you start talking about trackways and castings and audio recordings, you start addressing the 4 different things you would try to achieve as a researcher who's out in the field. You want picture or video, something to that effect. You want audio recordings, castings, or DNA. Those are really the 4 corners in which you're trying to capture evidence out of, right? Short of an actual body. And very few times have you had instances in which more than one of those is ever brought to the community, right? Somebody gets a picture, somebody gets an audio recording, but it's never both. It's never tracks and an audio recording. It's never. And since the Patterson-Gimlin film, we really haven't seen that. That's the interesting thing about the Patterson-Gimlin film is they not only had a video, but they seen exactly where it walked. They were able to look at footprints, or at least the pathway in which it traveled. Yeah. Had they been aware back then of DNA and the capability of DNA, they probably could have found hair samples and things like that and preserved those too. They kind of had a moment in which they had more than just one of those 4 elements there. Yeah. And we just don't see that much in research, that very often in research. And that's what I think is interesting about the Carpenter-Harrington thing. Whether you believe them or not, it's all going to shake itself out. And we're talking about a property in which they've got castings from 9 different trackways, and now they've got this lengthy audio recording, that in this recording, it does display chatter, whoops, screams, all the different vocalization styles that we often refer to, that were all seem to be captured in the Sierra sound. So by more than one individual. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's the real deal. It's too premature to do that. But I'm cautiously optimistic to see what they bring to the table.
Yeah. Will it shape up to be something? I hope so. We can only hope, you know. We've been through a lot of disappointments over the year, the Erickson project, the Ketchum study, but we'll see what happens. Let's throw the chat room. Hey, Joe, you're back. I see, still muted, but you're back.
Yeah,
there we are. And any thoughts on any of this? This sounds pretty fascinating stuff
well,
going on.
Like I said, and I've been commenting in the chat too. I mean, the whole thing is, you know, first of all, like I said, it has not been established that Bigfoot even has a language, much less postulating as some are in the chat. Maybe they have different languages like the Native Americans had different languages. Well, first of all, you got to establish that Bigfoot even has a language to begin with.
Correct.
And no matter what the Sierra sounds are, we don't know basically what they are. You know, they don't. Ron Moorhead does not come right out and say, or at least I haven't experienced it, oh, those are Bigfoot. So we don't know what is making those noises. Could it be Bigfoot? Maybe.
I think one thing that
I haven't heard anything like that except for the Sierra Sounds. In 45 years, I've never heard samurai chatter. You know, I mean, I've heard weird sounds. I've heard things that are like whoops, but not like what you hear in the Sierra Sounds. Yep. What I've heard, I eventually chalked up to being either loons, or there is such a bird called a whooping crane, and we do have those here in New York. So, yeah, when it comes to that stuff, I mean, you know, first let's establish, do they actually have it? And I mean, I understand this is where we're trying to go with that, right?
Well, I don't know if they are or not, Joe. What I think where the more important place they're trying to go is establishing the capability to make a sound. Okay. So, you know, when you start talking about phonetics, I don't know that 5 syllables put together that sound similar to 5 syllables captured somewhere else on audio put together necessarily supports evidence of a language. When I use wildlife acoustics analyzing software. So when I take if I capture a wolf making a sound or wolves making a sound, I can run it through that software, and it'll start out with one wolf that starts howling, and then you'll see that spectrum track into 2 when the second one joins, and all of a sudden there's 5 of them there. And as one dies down, it disappears and one starts coming up. It's like as a pack, they start making these sounds, right? That software can identify when I run another sound through it and say, what is this? And it looks at all these different recorded vertebrae, you know, avians, mammals, and everything in its database, and says, this is what it believes that it is. It's not identifying that any of them have a language. It's just identifying that their capable vocal ranges would identify that they could produce that sound. I think that's what's interesting about the Harrington Carpenter audio, is if it is authentic and it is similar to the Sierra Sounds. And again, if the Sierra Sounds are authentic, if you could establish that these are 2 species that seem to be capable of making the same sounds. That doesn't necessarily mean there's anything to a language. You know what I mean?
I got a couple of questions. First, this one's for Jeff. What's the general location where this new audio was recorded?
It's in Oklahoma.
Yep, that's what I thought. And we have another question: is the government has taken photos from satellites that could read newspaper and taken every inch of Earth? Where are the photos? I don't think they've taken every single necessarily inch of the Earth at the detail we would like. And again, to move a satellite to shoot over a particular area for a particular person or creature or whatever for a particular time costs a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of actually manpower to man that to make sure it gets over where it needs to get over.
Yeah, the canopy too. I mean, in the woods, that tree cover, man, you can't.
Right, you can't see anything.
Yeah, the Earth's surface is ever changing when it comes to snow cover, canopy cover, river levels, water levels, up and down, exposing. It's just ever changing. What the snapshot one day is, when we look at metro areas and things like that, obviously you see where buildings were knocked down there's buildings that aren't there that were 6 months ago and buildings that are built that weren't there it's almost the same out in the wilderness. It changes seasonally and depending on, like I say, rivers and things like that. The landscape can always look different. Wildfires. There's so much stuff that makes stuff look different.
Here's a different angle that I find this very actually curious myself. A different take on this. For After Crazy, what he was saying. Is anybody aware of all these times that people, and we know that there's been researchers out there that just people have accepted, oh, these are Bigfoot, and they call sound blast the Sierra sound. Has there ever been anybody that's ever got a response from sound blasting the Sierra sounds? Not that I know of. I haven't heard anybody that have gone out, sound blasted the Sierra sounds and got returned sounds back from doing that sound the same.
I know that, I guess I'm reluctant to go out and make any type of vocalization or necessarily try to speak a language that I don't know how to speak. Okay. From a research standpoint, I know there are people that are ready to do that now, but the truth is if the four of us went out at 3 a.m. and banged on a tree twice, waited 32 seconds, banged on a tree 5 times, waited 12 seconds. If something banged back, that'd be a really cool story for us to tell at the bar, but you didn't advance the ball 1 inch when it comes to solving this mystery. So, and if I was to go out and call blast sounds and something whoops back, again, I don't know that we've really proved anything. I mean, you've got to need experience, but I don't know that you've advanced the science.
Has anybody done it and recorded it being done is what I'm saying. Yeah. Not just somebody saying, well, I did call blast it and we got these sounds back. I'm talking about somebody actually going out on video, call blasting these things, and then recording return sounds coming back from that. I don't think I've ever seen something like that yet.
And then in some of these areas, I mean, I guess if I was to do that, Joe, if I was going to be in northern Idaho or, in parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, areas where I knew I was 20 miles away from the nearest human being, or at least it was likely that I was, maybe I'd try that. That'd be the only scenarios and locations I'd do that. Would I go to Oklahoma and do it? Would I go to Florida and do it? Hell no. There's enough people like me and you out there with our ears open, and we hear some other idiot 1.5 miles away blasting that stuff, and all of a sudden, what do you think you heard, Joe? Another guy out there drinking beer call blasting, or did you hear something real? I mean,
right.
It was a porcupine.
It was a porcupine. But seriously, I mean, have you heard anybody ever doing that, Steve, yourself, in the time you've been doing this?
No. I may have gotten a response once, but I don't use like the samurai chatter. I use the portion of the Sierra sounds that has the whooping and the knocking, and it's like whoop whoop whoop, and it's.
Well, back in 2009, I think it was, I made a call blast CD, and I had some different sounds on there. I didn't have the Sierra sounds on there or anything, but I did some different stuff. And I had I had theorized that a baby crying might entice a female Bigfoot, pique the curiosity and get her, kind of prey on those maternal instincts and try to draw a female in by listening to a baby cry, out in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And, it didn't work.
That's interesting, Chris, though, because I think there's more accounts of people reporting hearing babies crying in the woods or female voices in the woods than there are of people saying they heard samurai chatter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, me and my wife's heard the baby sound camping out where I had my encounter. We heard them at like 3:00 in the morning, baby type sounds, but I think I figured out what it was. It wasn't a baby Sasquatch. Let's put it that way.
Let's, let me predicate this by something, saying that I think any call blasting that would elicit a curiosity response out of a Sasquatch, which is natural to primates, is a good thing, as long as it's not aggressive. Like, right. I'm not really a big, go out there and, try to do a territorial type of sound. But, but if you turn around and do some whoops or some tree knocking or whatever, that's going to elicit their curiosity. They may come closer. That's what you want them to do. Yeah. So I don't elicit necessarily call blasting to elicit a response necessarily like an audible. But
and the other thing that we need to the other thing you need to keep in mind is you are speaking a language that you don't understand. I mean, I don't know how to speak Chinese. I don't know how to speak Chinese, but if I tried to just make Chinese, act like I did, and I was talking to Jackie Chan and I made up something that sounded Chinese, how do I know that I didn't just ask him, do you want to fight? Because I don't want to ask that dude if he wants to.
Well, that's what Nick was saying, Jeff.
That's why the safest type of sounds you can use are whoops, because whoops and all other primates, aside from us, are curiosity.
Their curiosity, and I think their location. If I whoop and you whoop back, I get a general idea of where you're located. And then if I move, and I know you've likely moved, and I whoop and you whoop back, we're letting each other know where we're at. We're really not doing anything other than just identifying where we're at.
Right. And last call for the call-in line, if you want to ask anybody here a question, 518-692-4518. Last call, 518-692-4518, because we're getting close to the end of the show.
Yeah, I've never done any of the call stuff. I mean, I've never done the call blasting, like using a recording or anything, and I've never gone out to make those kind of, because I can't.
Francis, I know a few German. Oh, why is that keeps popping up? I know a few words in German. Can I call blast that too?
Nice.
Was ist los mit du, Dan?
Was ist los?
Haben Sie einen Vogel?
That's right.
Scheißen Sie in deinen Hosen?
That's the one you need to call blast in German is kommen Sie her, bitte.
I think
schnell. Bitte mach schnell.
There's a lot of difference in research techniques and how people do their research.
Yep.
And some guys will go out to an area and they'll get a stick, they'll knock on the tree, and listen for a response. And if they get a response, we got a response. That's great. And then the next night they go out, knock again. And did they get a response? Oh, got a response. Well, that's just kind of monotonous. You go out there and knock on the tree. Okay, you got a response, so they're in the area. See, to me, that's the first step. Mm-hmm. Find the area that they're in.
Sasquatch in the night.
Then it's time. You got to make a plan.
Squatch in the night.
Time to put boots on the ground.
That one's too light. I'll try a big one.
This tool that he has bought is
after you determine that you have maybe some activity in the area, now it's time to put boots on the ground,
Sure.
get out there during the day, put in the miles, and see if you can have a sighting or find some tracks.
Well, I think that.
Well, here,
I've said this a lot.
Towards them.
What's that?
I said hearing wood knocks is great and knocking back is all wonderful and it's a great experience. But how about this? Wood knocks. Go towards the wood knock.
Here we go. Okay, caller from the 661 area code. You're on Squatch-D TV. 661. Hello. Hello.
Hi. This is Danny from Southern Sierra. Just want to know what the gang thought about the Independence Day footage. I thought I heard you comment negatively on it, Steve, but I'm not sure. I might be misquoting you there.
I'm trying to think of the Independence Day. I always confuse that one because there's the Memorial Day footage.
Memorial Day?
Right, and that's different. It's a real clear one.
The Independence Day would be
supposedly the mom, dad, and an infant.
Oh,
okay,
that one.
That's the Independence Day. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that was already debunked as a Leroy Blevins.
Leroy Blevins, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was Leroy Blevins putting that out there to kind of fool people to see if anybody would using.
Yeah, Leroy had built he was he's no longer with us, but he was a smart guy. Okay. And he was a firm believer.
I heard you give a negative on that. Is that correct?
Correct.
I don't. Yeah, can you hear Chris talking?
It's breaking up a little bit, Steve. How am I coming in?
You're coming in fine. It just may be a little of this. Let me try one thing a little bit.
You're good. You're good now. You're good now.
Okay. So, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead and answer that one again.
Yeah. The Independence Day footage, which was the reported female with the infant. Okay, yeah, that was a Leroy Blevins hoax. And Leroy he was a firm believer. Now, Leroy's not with us anymore, but he was a firm believer that the Patterson-Gimlin film was a hoax and that Patty was a suit. And he was so dedicated to this that he said he knew he could build a suit. And he did build a dang good suit. He really did. And if you've seen the Independence footage, the Independence Day footage, where the mother picks up the infant, that's Leroy.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Did you get that, Danny?
I did, Steve, and I'd like to comment on that if I could real quick.
Sure.
Thursday, I just saw on Squatch America, and gosh, I can't believe I'm still learning Bigfoot stuff. I can't remember the guy's name. He's written about 15 books. If you said his name, but anyway, I think he cited Thinker Thunker and the body ratios on that, not just the Patty film, but on the Independence Day film as well. And he was of the strong mind that could not be, that could not be humans in there.
Thinker Thunker?
Yeah, well, hang on one second. I got to kill my monitor down a little bit. Thinker Thunker can, just a couple of things. Thinker Thunker can, he can go off course, but I wouldn't consider everything he says as gospel either. So I would, be very careful about that. I wouldn't take everything I say as gospel.
No.
It's very, it's very important that people are going to have diverse opinions, but
people who are in the business
I
of
just want to see
giving
how
an
somebody can
opinion
work around that, and 3 suits to fake, and that's I'll call back sometime and have a little more. I just can't remember the guy's name that was on there. You'd know him. Old timers have written about 15 books on.
Sure, if that's the video of it walking behind rocks and stuff like that.
Yeah. So now I'm green, but when I first saw that, I thought, wow, that looks kind of natural, and I guess somebody could go the lengths of 3 costumes instead of 1. They could pull out, but the body ratios. I mean, how do you move an elbow and make it move in a different spot?
Yeah, I got to take a better look at that one, but
Well, thanks. I appreciate you taking my call.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah, I'll take a better look at it. We can have another discussion on that.
And Leroy was
all right.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for calling.
Bye.
He was a conspiracy theorist, and he written several books on the JFK. A lot of anything that was a conspiracy.
Yeah,
Leroy was into it. Yep. And he was a firm believer that the Patterson-Gimlin film was faked, and he was of so much a strong opinion about it. He was going to build a patty suit, and by golly, he built a pretty good suit. He really did. And there used to be some photos of it on the Bigfoot forums. I don't know if they're still there or not. Still kept the old forum up. You know, you might be able to find them there, but he's got some pretty good photos, pretty good work on that suit. You know, I think it fell short of being Patty. I think it fell short by a bunch.
Yep.
But with that Independence Day footage, I think you're getting a good look at the suit.
Yep.
I think it's important to stay mindful that when it comes to those who are in the business of giving a thumbs up and a thumbs down to things, that, you know, nobody's going to bet 1,000. Even those guys are going to get it wrong. I think Thinker Thunker has got it right more than he's got it wrong. And then here comes the Feller Buncher video, right? I mean, it's like, once you see that, you're like, okay, he's not guaranteed to knock it out of the park. He's going to make mistakes. And, you know, I don't think any of us are immune to that possibility of being wrong, you know?
Yeah, he fell, Leroy's fell short. His suit fell short of being Patty. But what I was saying, though, from what we've seen with people wearing the gorilla suits and trying to make a Halloween Bigfoot, a Butchie Kid video, Leroy's suit was pretty good.
Yep. Well, folks, it's come to that time again. Guess what time it is? It's that time again where it is time to say goodbye.
Oh, man.
And I want to thank, hang on a second, I got this little interesting, that's better. We have this little interesting thing going on right now with my headset for a minute. But anyway, we have come to the end of the show, but I want to thank first Mark Henry for coming on tonight. He's not with us right now, but thank you for coming on. Joe, thanks for popping on a couple of times, answering that question. Jeff, as always, thank you. Yeah. And I had a fun time tonight. And with that, Chris, do your thing, brother.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank Mark for coming on, and Joe and Jeff for joining us here. Thank everybody in chat, everybody on the podcast. We appreciate you guys. If it's the first time listening to the show, check us out on YouTube. If you're watching the YouTube channel, hey man, hit a subscribe, hit a like. It's the only way that we can be found in the search algorithm. And we appreciate you guys. You guys make the show, and you always, give us so many different directions to go in.
One of the best things we can do for channels like ours is share it with your friends. I mean, if there's people in this community that are like-minded like you are, and you know for a fact that they aren't tuning in to Steve's show, tell them about it. Share a link to it.
Yep, sharing is caring. So, but anyway, thanks again, gentlemen, for coming on. I want to wish everybody. Hey, I think the call-in line worked out great tonight. So that was pretty cool, and so we got something new. Oh, don't forget, now we got Scriptozoology.
Cryptozoology, thanks, Mick.
I'm gonna have to start using that one too. We have hashtag stopthewoonacy, hashtag no red circles, hashtag no Scriptozoology. So that's pretty. We're gonna use that. And hello, Nikki. And again, thanks everybody for tuning in. We're glad to see you all, and we'll catch you all here next week, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Squatch-D TV. As always, everybody keep safe. God bless. Have a fun, healthy week. And always keep on squatching.
Hey folks, you've been watching Squatch-D TV. Join us each week, Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for the latest on the Bigfoot mystery. As always, we thank you for being our loyal viewers and encourage all to subscribe to our YouTube page at youtube.com/Steve Kulls. As always, have a great week. Stay safe. God bless. And keep on squatching.